and the environmental variables. The affluence, how much stuff do those people have, and technology, which both increases the amount of impact and decreases the amount of impact. I'll loop back to that at the end. Something that's important to understand as you look at these two questions, and we think philosophically about these questions, but also think mathematically about these three questions, is human population, uniquely and disproportionately impacts the environment. There are way more birds on the planet than there are people. There are way more insects on the planet than there are people. People are very, very unique in terms of the footprint that we leave on this planet. The ecological impact that people have. How we measure it, we look at it by using these three things, and we can extrapolate or project what the impact is and will be based on the trends that are occurring in these. But nothing else ever in the history of our planet has ever altered or impacted the planet as much as humans. We want to think a little bit about the economy. So what goes into the amount of impact? And for people who are in AP Macro or have studied business or read about business, if that's an interest of yours, some of this will be kind of a repeat, but there's going to be some key things that relate to environmental science that I want to zero in on. And so even if you know some of this information, make sure you stay with me to keep track of some of it. But this flow diagram shows some of the key important parts. One key definition that I just want to start being able to use this term openly in our classes is capital. Capital is a valuable resource of any particular kind. Value is a loaded definition inside of this definition. So something like gold has value, but it doesn't have inherent value. It's just a shiny metal. It's not really worth anything. A lot of money is based on gold. Money that's not based on gold is just based on numbers and charts and figures about the quantity and the economies of a country. So there's no inherent value in that. So we're not really talking about value in that way. We're talking about things that actually have value. And so we'll use capital a lot to look, well, what is the value of some tangible thing or some intangible thing? What does it actually do, or what can it be used for? What is the value behind it? So we have things like natural capital. All kinds of resources, trees, fresh water, minerals that come from rocks. All those are examples of natural capital. Human capital is people. People have the ability to do things. We can work, we can function, we can write text, we can do all kinds of things. Human capital is another example. Business capital is the value that a good or a service that's provided by a business does for the world, or it can do for the environment or for society. So all those things are example of capitals. Check out this chart. So you use resources to make things, and businesses will make decisions. Well, how much does it cost me to make or perform a service or build a good? And what is the what is the benefit that can be provided? And the benefit comes in, if I can provide a benefit, then people will purchase or buy my good or service. So I need to know how much will it cost me to do that, produce that good or service, and how much benefit will it give society. And so I have to make businesses and business managers make all kinds of decisions. All of their decisions are, what are the costs and benefits associated with doing any given thing inside of a business? That is central to everything. If you can understand that, you're halfway to your MBA. The second thing is, there's risks and opportunities associated with doing things. So businesses are trying to capitalize on opportunities and minimize risks. Underlying behind is societies are functioning and they're trying to leverage things that will improve quality of human life, and all of those are provided by human and natural capital. So that's part of the link of us to the natural world in terms of global economies. Everybody feels good with this so far? All right, here's where we'll get to markets for some repeat information, but I want to talk about a key graph and kind of dissect it and walk through it and make sense of it. So the first thing that we're going to think about is this curve called demand. There are two axes on here. On the x-axis is the quantity demanded. So how much is demanded, and up here is the price. The price of whatever good or service that we're talking about that's in demand. I want to use one example here just to think about as a thinking exercise. What do you think is the demand for the internet in the year 1600? What is the demand for the internet? None. I got none. If we polled all kinds of people, the most common answer I think was none. That's good. Why do you think none? Doesn't exist. How can people want what doesn't even exist? Computers don't even exist. Let's break down the internet a little bit. What is the internet? What does the internet provide? If you say the internet and we want to try to explain to somebody, yeah. It's connection, which allows what kind of things? Communication. Do people communicate in the year 1600? Do you think they would be happy if there were better ways to communicate? Okay. What else is happening on the internet? You're sharing information. All kinds of knowledge is exchanged. Libraries that used to be produced were reserved for elites. Do you think the general public would improve quality of life for huge swaths of the population to increase their knowledge? So the demand for knowledge is extremely high. The demand for communication and communication is extremely high. Do you purchase goods on the internet? That's much easier than having to travel to a marketplace to purchase goods. So all of these things that the internet provides, the demand for those things is infinitely high. So here's the note I want to land on. The human demand for things that improve quality of life is immeasurable. It's infinitely high. So the demand for what the internet would provide is huge in the year 1600. It's even more than it is now. But the manifestation of what the internet is, as a physical, tangible thing that's used, because it doesn't exist, we don't have people demanding the internet because they don't even know what it looks like. But we know the trajectory of what people want is to improve the quality of human life. So I want you to think of demand as a constant. It's anything that can improve quality of life. So the amount that's demanded is a function of the price. If something is really expensive, if I could say, here's this computer, internet, but it's going to cost your life and all of your family's life, no one would pay that in the year 1600. The price is too high. So the amount that people demand is a function of what the price is. If a good or service is more expensive, you're less likely to buy it. If the iPhone costs $50,000, far fewer of us would have them in our pocket right now. Let's look at the other part. This is the supply line. So again, we have quantity here. So this is the quantity supplied in this case, and this is the price of supply. So we have these same things. So here's the question that I just want to ask. What determines whether or not you will buy a product? What's the number one thing? Advertising might fuel. It might expose you to the fact that it will improve your quality of life. But when you're making an actual decision of whether I will buy this product or not buy this product, what is the number one thing? I just gave the answer, by the way. Yeah. The price. Because the quantity for anything that will improve, the demand for anything that will improve life is infinite. So not that actually happens, the price. Very good. Let's break down this line a little bit more, and I want to talk about markets with a simple 1-minute video. This quote from the video says, there needs to be some kind of balance, and I'm looking for a key term from the text that's talked about in this video, but otherwise I just want you to think about the forces of supply and demand based on a good, which is bananas.
Let's assume you live in a small town where nobody sells bananas. In other words, zero supply. Now, let's also assume that the people who live there would love to eat bananas. In other words, there's a decent demand for bananas. As we can see, there's currently an imbalance. People want bananas, but there are no sellers. Peter understands this and starts selling bananas. At the beginning, his profit will be huge because lots of people want bananas, and he's the only one who has them. As time passes, however, Sarah will notice how well Peter and start selling bananas herself. Increases the supply of bananas, and the more supply there will be. If too many people end up selling bananas, but the demand doesn't increase as well, there will be too much supply and some of them will go out of business. Eventually, some kind of a balance tends to be reached.
I'm refusing to support whatever that video is because it blocked my current video. Anyways, okay, so let's break down this, and I want to make sure that you put some of the key elements in your mind because I'm going to come back to them. What's the demand for bananas at the beginning? High. What's driving demand? Why would people even want this? Let's just try to think about this. How do they improve quality of human life? Nutrients. They taste good. They give you potassium, reduce cramps. All right, so bananas, do they improve quality of life? Yeah. Do people want them? Of course, because they improve quality of life. Depends on their availability and what their product looks like. So when there aren't very many bananas, and people are like, hey, you know what's a good fruit? Bananas. What is the price people are willing to pay? High. What happens when other people notice that situation? So we have a market and an economy around a single product. This is the easiest example of this that we can. What happens? What was the consequence when people noticed, hey, you know what? People are paying $5 a pound for bananas. What happened? Other people started selling. And so if I want people to keep buying my bananas, what did I have to do? I have to lower the price. Last thing to think about, at the beginning there were no bananas. Then some people were buying bananas. What did the total consumption of bananas cumulatively look like in the early stages? High for a few people. It's kind of low, but as competition increases, what happens to the consumption of the resource? It goes up, right? Keep these elements in your mind because I'm going to come back to them. Let's look at this graph again. Oh, wait, before I go. The name of the balance. What is this called? Does anybody know? It's the same thing that you would call an intersection point in chemistry or in other disciplines. It's the equilibrium point. I'm going to use this and we're going to look at this again. So here are our lines. We looked at the lines individually. Let's look at them together. Here is quantity that's either supplied or demanded. Here is the price. And both of these lines are moving simultaneously in accordance with one another. So the supply line is happening the functions of that line are impacting the functioning of the demand line. So what do I mean by that? Let's start. Here's supply. So when the supply is very low, what is the quantity demanded? It's way up here. It's high. What is the price that people will pay? They're willing to pay a high price, and the quantity is low. As the supply increases, the amount demanded goes down, and the price people are willing to pay because of the availability of that product or good is going down, and so they'll pay less. This is the equilibrium point here. Almost every decision that happens inside of businesses is trying to figure out, this is hard to calculate, it's hard to estimate, but everything is going into figuring out, well, how much are people willing to pay for my product? And it's a function of how many like things are like it in the marketplace. So what is the supply? And that will tell you the amount demanded, which should tell you how many to make. So that's a business decision. How much product or good am I going to make? And how much I'm going to charge. Does this make sense? This is what businesses do. If you're a business-oriented person, you'll spend your life toiling in this graph right here. I have a couple examples. What happens to the quantity demanded if the price of supply goes up? So here's my supply line, and here is my demand line. So if I take this line and I increase the price so it's no longer here, I'm going to put it here. What happens to the quantity demanded? So here's the demand. Instead of the intersection point being here, let me walk across the stage. If I put my line here and the equilibrium point that used to be here is now here. What happens on the quantity demanded if I draw that line down? If the price goes up, the quantity demanded, what happens? It goes down, right? This is just based on the rational behavior of humans. Let's look at the opposite. What happens if the quantity demanded? What happens to the quantity demanded if the price supply goes down? So here's our supply line, and now it's here. We're shifting it to where the price is down. So it's on this point. The equilibrium point that used to be here is now here. What happens to the quantity demanded? It goes up. Because more of a population can afford it, it's easier, they don't have to make complex decisions, so the quantity goes up. Does this make sense? This will be really key in one of the environmental factors that we'll talk about here in a second. Before we get to that, let's talk about the forces that are driving the decision that we just talked about. And I want to use a text that will expose parts of it as part of this class, but I want to pull it out. This is a seminal text written in 1968 by Mr. Hardin, a social economic scientist. It's about this thing, and we'll use this term. It'll come up a lot. The tragedy of the commons. So let's break this down. There are 3 pillars to the tragedy of the commons, and they're based on the rational way that people and businesses behave. Here's number 1. The first thing is individuals, and we can think of that as either you or I, or individual businesses, any business entity, are going to make decisions that are going to maximize their personal gain. So individuals are going to increase my quality of life, not decrease my quality of life. Everyone agrees with that as a basic thing, right? That is a social behavior that we could not untether ourselves from. It's inherent. The same is true for businesses. A business is going to make a decision that's going to maximize their personal gain. So if I can do something, if I go back to that flow chart, of running my business, if I'm a business decision maker, I'll do that every day of the week because it will maximize my profit opportunity. If I can do things to increase the price that I sell my good for, I'll do that, of course. Now, this is a quote from the text, and I want to think about what you guys learned about before Christmas break. In an overpopulated world where resources are limited and competition is high, what are the consequences of that rational behavior? If I am making decisions that are going to benefit me, is the usage of resources going to go up or down? It's going to go up. And if there are more people, what is that going to do? They're going to go down. We're going to start over-consuming them. What about if competition is really high? If I have to beat other people to continue to exist as a business entity, and I'm making decisions in order to make that happen, what happens to the total amount of resources on the planet? Do they go up or down? They go down, right? So as we think about businesses and individuals, we're using a lot of resources, and we're doing that based on the rational decision to benefit myself in the short term. What's compromised is the long-term good. In this example, the total availability of resources on our planet. Here's pillar 2. There are where there is no technical solution behind. We'll take copper as a resource example. Earth is static in terms of resources. We're a closed system. We can't get more copper. I can't make copper. It's an element. There's no technical solution for more copper. So as businesses are using a lot and individuals are using a lot of this resources, and that trend is continuing because of competition and overpopulation, I'm not going to be able to solve the solution of limited copper through technology. That's going to cause a problem. So 3 is, these are not just 1, 2, 3, they're in sequence. So first we have the behavior, and then we have a reality, and then the third thing is, in order to maintain or protect the common good, there needs to be. So the tragedy of the commons is, when you hear this that's number 1, that people are making decisions to benefit themselves and compromising the common good. We'll see many examples of that, and the tragedy is that the common good is going to go down. The remedy for that is going to be things like regulation and administration. So if you say, hey, you can't do this, or it's against the law, or whatever, or there's policies, or social coercion is something that's common now. Customers are demanding that I do my business in a certain way because that's what they want. Or the privatization of resources, which we'll look at here in a second. But these are the three, so far, people who study this, economists, they don't have additional solutions. These are the three solutions for management. Does this make sense? Everyone feels good on tragedy of commons. Here's a quick question for consideration. Do market forces, just in review, such as high demand, do they increase overconsumption of the resources? Think of the banana. For sure. The market forces such as competition increase overconsumption. Absolutely. Okay, great. Now I want to talk about a new definition, which is a key definition called an externality. An externality is any side effect or consequence that's associated with doing an activity or producing a good. Especially in a business, we're talking about something that's unrelated to the product itself. So what are some examples that we can think of? We'll use pollution as an example because it's a really easy one. So here's a question. I want to point out there's positive and negative, but let's get this pollution one as an example. So here's our graph, just to get familiar with it again. Quantity demanded, the price that people are willing to pay. Here's our supply line. Here's our demand line. Demand is a constant. People want things that improve their quality of life, but they're going to act according to most reliably the price. So the government has determined, any government, has determined that the production of sulfur dioxide is damaging. Sulfur dioxide is a toxin. It causes acid rain. We'll learn about that later when we talk specifically about pollution. But we've determined it's bad. But acid rain that's causing a problem in a forest or a far by away, that's not affecting the functioning of a business like a car manufacturer or a person who buys a car or drives a car. It's a common good. Clean water coming out of the rain is a common good. It's not part of the natural capital that they're tapping to make this product. So it's an externality. Here we go. Products such as cars emit this, and they're subject, in this example, to a government tax. What is a tax going to do to the price? The supply price. I used to make it, but now I have to pay this tax on top of it. What does it do to the price? It increases it. All right? So in return, here's my supply line, and I'm going to shift this line from here. On the price axis, I'm going to move it up. So what does that do to the quantity demanded? Here's the new intersection point. What does it do to the quantity demanded? It decreases the quantity demanded. So it will increase the supply cost and decrease the quantity demanded. Example of what kind of externality? It's a negative. The businesses didn't used to have to care about, but now they do have to care about. They've internalized the cost, so they had to pay this cost for associated with acid rain. Now the business is having to care about it as part of the government tax. Bees. Bees are terrific. Everyone loves bees right now. Bees perform an ecological service. They also perform an economic service for someone who makes honey. So, bees go out, they pollinate a bunch of flowers, they bring back honey, you can sell that honey. Beekeeper companies are rewarded by a government, and they receive an incentive. So, what will that do to the supply cost? It will decrease it. It still costs me this much, but the government writes me a fat check at the end of the year. I'm happy about that. What happens to the price demanded? More people want to buy honey when it costs $3 than when it costs $10. Make sense? It's a positive externality. So you can incentivize, or governments or administrative agencies or consumers can incentivize companies to change the market forces based on internalizing external costs. Does this make sense? All right, great. So let's think about economies again more broadly. What's toggled top here are the 2015 United Nations goals. United Nations got together and thought about what is our goal, what is our mission, what do we need to do globally. These were the 17 priorities bucketed into this one thing called sustainable development, making sure that we can meet the demands of today without compromising the needs for populations in the future. And it requires a huge upgrade to the economy, something that we've never done as a human society ever before. Let's look at a couple component parts. We've talked about businesses, and businesses function according to market forces. If you lump all businesses together within a country, we can measure the health of the economy. The most common parameter, not necessarily the best parameter, but the one that's used often to measure the health of the economy, is the gross domestic product, and here's the definition. It's the total value of new goods or services produced or provided in a country during a given year. Here's an example. Here's 4 examples, actually. Which one of these would go into the gross domestic product of the United States? Apples grown in Washington and sold in Virginia. Shoes made in Pennsylvania and sold in Canada. Zippers made in Mexico but sold in the United States. Or used cars sold in North Dakota. Which ones qualify? Think about it for a second. Let's break it down together. Apples in Washington sold in Virginia. That produced in a country in a given year and sold? Yes, that's part of the GDP. Shoes made in Pennsylvania but sold in Canada. Yes, produced in the given year and sold in the given year. It benefits that country's economy. Zippers made in Mexico but sold in New York. Wrong, it's the opposite. That benefits Mexico's GDP, and used cars sold in North Dakota. No, because it's not new. So in this example, both 1 and 2. This graphic shows all of the GDPs of the entire world for a 20-year span, starting in the year 35-year span, 1980 to the year 2015. Here's the United States. These are North American countries. This is Asia. Japan was the largest for an extremely long time until recently. Now China, which is the second biggest economy in the world, in Europe. And here's Brazil and South America, and this is Eastern Europe. So we can see what this looks like, but if you hear about the GDP, what you know is it's things that are new. So the reason it's a common parameter is it's talking about growth of the economy. These are new things that are being exchanged and sold. The GDP doesn't measure everything, obviously. It only measures what about, does the used cars sold in North Dakota benefit the local economy and benefit people there? Well, if I'm the owner of the car dealership, certainly yes. So there are other things, even in the economy, measured in this. If I'm living in a country where they're producing electronic cables, but they're polluting the river, and there's a high number of because of pollution in the water, part of the measurement. So when we talk about the health of a country, we default to look at the gross domestic product, but it's not the whole picture. There are a couple other indices that are used as well. So in the textbook, they talk about this the genuine progress indicator, talking about human improvement of human quality of life within a country related to progress. But there are another parameter that's really similar. The one that's used in Gapminder is called the Human Development Index. So you might see HDI here as well. What are some things that go into the GPI or the HDI that aren't part of the GDP? What other factors? I'll give you a hint. It's all of these things listed on the slide, but give them to me. I'll look at it. Actually read it. Air pollution. Does air pollution affect quality of human life? Absolutely. What else? Volunteer work. Good. What else? What? Commuting. How much time I spend going to my job, going to the marketplace, home. Takes away from home at family, home doing other things. What else? Anything else? I didn't hear anything from A whole sector. Underemployment. Okay, so the big idea here is, and you might think bottom line, but understanding that the health of human societies and people who live in the country isn't just the economic health. It's all of these things and probably more that aren't listed on here. But it's one pillar is economic. People need jobs. People need to improve quality of life. Goods and services need to be produced. People need to buy groceries for food. People need to buy sanitation. People need to buy medicine. The economy is extremely important. The environment is also important. And the social aspects of the fabric of our society are important as well. So there are other measurements when we're looking at the health of societies that need to be taken into account, not just the GDP. Talk about technology here to kind of close this out. First, I want everybody to take your computer and open up Gapminder if you can. We're going to run a simulation. We're going to think about this example related to pollution that I used and the externalities around sulfur dioxide. Everybody got it? We're going to work with the bubble diagram. On the x-axis, I want you to choose the GDP. So let's look at the health of some countries. It should be income, but you can choose GDP as well. So everybody got Gapminder looked up? Gapminder is our friend. It's an unbelievable tool. This version of Gapminder, by the way, has only existed for 2 years. You guys are doing work that used to befuddle economists. We're just doing it in real time in our class right now. You can't appreciate that very well, but I appreciate it. Everybody's got GDP on the bottom. On the y-axis, put sulfur emissions, sulfur dioxide emissions. And then for a couple countries, the United States, Japan, and Brazil. Just look at 3 countries. The 196 countries on our planet is a bit too much. Total sulfur emissions. And then run it across time and see what happens. So we've seen that trend. We've done this kind of exercise before. X-axis GDP, Y-axis total sulfur emissions, countries United States, Japan, and Brazil. What do you notice in the United States? What is the shape of the graph? Does anyone have it up yet? Oh, hit play at the bottom. On the bottom left, hit play and let it go from 1960 till now and see what the trends tell us. What's the shape of the graph? Yeah? Like a log graph? Kind of goes up and then levels off. Okay, keep the simulation open, but I just want to pause and get back to this idea of technology and think about something as a concept for a second. So, keep on the simulation, but I'm going to tell you the more important thing, and I'll show you the simulation. If you didn't get it, don't worry about it. I'll show you. So cars emit sulfur dioxide. So as more cars go on the road and technology is invented around cars and people like cars and the price of cars goes down, what do you think happens? What's the first thing that happens with the total amount of environmental impact if we're measuring that as the sulfur dioxide? We know that cars, combustion of engines causes sulfur dioxide to be emitted. That's a pollutant. It's a bad thing. So the impact, what happens as more cars go on the road? Does the impact increase or decrease? It increases. It's way more now in the year 1995 and in the year 2015 than it was in the year 1915 because of the invention of technology. The United States government is one of them in the early 90s that this caused harm, so they imposed regulations to say cars can no longer emit this. So what is the response if you're a business that makes cars? What do you think they did? They invented technology to reduce the production of sulfur dioxide. First thing that happens is, as technology is created, overconsumption and overproduction produces more environmental impact. But if one of the techniques from the tragedy of commons, like regulation as an example, and externalities are internalized, companies continue to innovate because they don't want to incur those costs, and so the impact goes down. I'm going to skip 2 slides really quick. Here's a bunch of countries. Here's the United States in green. So the amount of sulfur dioxide went up. What do you think happened here? A regulation was put in place. Companies responded, and technology continued to improve, and the amount of environmental impact went down. In Japan, regulation was put in place earlier. Look at the effect. Environmental impact was going up. Technology was invented because companies wanted to get around regulation, and environmental impact went down. In El Salvador, no environmental impact regulation. What's happening? Well, as the company improves and technology gets cheaper, more people are buying cars, their emissions are still going up. So here's a couple questions. This is called the Kuznets curve. That's a key term for you to know. That's a definition that you should have. Kuznets curve relates to this trend. So as the GDP increases, environmental impact does what? It first goes up, and then it goes down. So when you see that trend, or you think about that principle, you should know that. That's called Kuznets curve. If I take that technology, so the technology exists today. It's out there. It's in your car that you probably drove to school today because of the technology that's imposed by our government. If you take that and import it into El Salvador, what do you think is going to happen with their emissions? They're going to go down. So a couple key things just to pause on here. As the population of our planet goes up, overconsumption and overuse and impact of the environment is going to go up. As people have more stuff, and we're going to naturally want more stuff because it improves our quality of life, the environmental impact goes up. Technology will immediately also make environmental impact go up because it's going to improve quality of life, and people are going to want that stuff. Technology also has the capability of reducing environmental impact because if we apply scientific knowledge and engineer new solutions, then we can reduce our environmental impact. So as a population, as a global society, if we want to reduce the amount of impact, we can do a couple things. You can have less stuff, which is probably not going to happen, or you can employ sound technology to reduce impact. And one of the quickest ways to reduce global impact is to have open societies that share technology. There are all kinds of complications of why that doesn't occur, mostly because businesses want to win. So as you think about these 2 questions, though, that I posed at the beginning, what is your place in the world and what is your impact? You're making decisions based on the impulses that you rationally have. But as we think about companies and global economies, they interact in increasing ways. And so if we want to think about reducing impact, technology is probably going to be the best solution, and exporting technology and inventing new technology quickly and sharing that technology is one of the best solutions and one of the easiest ways to impose companies to make innovations is to make them internalize external costs. All right, you guys are out for today. More tomorrow. In here for more lecture. Yeah, day 1.